Hi, this is Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty. We've got a great episode coming up for you on We Don't Have to Choose. We're going to talk about the services that our office provides to victims who are harmed by domestic violence. So first, we're going to talk to Jen White, who's the Director of Community Affairs, and she also oversees our victim witness services. Then we're going to talk to the head of our DASC team, or Domestic Abuse Service Center, and we're going to hear about what DASC does. And how, although it is connected with the county attorney's office, you do not have to want to bring charges, and our staff will meet you where you're at. Then finally, we're going to talk to one of our fabulous victim witness specialists, and she's going to talk about what she does and why it's so important to our work here at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi, I'm here with Jen White, who is the Director of our Community Affairs Department. Jen also supervises victim witness services. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Mary.
Can you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am the Director of Community Affairs and Victim Services here in the County Attorney's Office. Prior to taking on this work in this role, I worked for the City of Minneapolis for 20 years, most recently doing violence prevention and intervention work.
So why are victim services important to the county attorney's office? Or first of all, maybe what are they and why are they important?
Sure. So our Victim Services Division provides support to victim survivors and their families through the court process and really through the criminal legal system, not just the court process, but helping to really be there step by step to help guide them, but also to provide resources and support in a trauma-informed way, and a lot of times culturally specific as well, to meet people where they're at.
One thing that's really struck me in this role are things that you don't really think about, where somebody's loved one dies or they're injured or something like that. What do you do? I mean, there's some pretty basic questions that most people don't have any reason to know the answers to. Is that part of what our people do?
Yes, absolutely. People find themselves in a situation that they would never have thought of or wanted to be in. So we can help folks navigate resources, filling out forms for crime victims reparations, helping folks with burial support, things like that, just to really lessen the burden, I guess, of trying to navigate a very complex system.
So how do our victim service specialists, I know we're going to be talking to Sunita, but how do they help people go through the criminal legal system, which is very confusing for everyone?
Right. So Sonita will be much better at talking about it than I will, but really to be there, from day one, once we get a case and they make that first contact with a victim or their family, just to introduce themselves, tell them what their role is, and kind of then what to expect, what's next, whether there will be, a first appearance, different hearings, things like that, preparing them for that, walking them through that, but then also providing that resources, connection and support as well that a lot of families and individuals need.
So why do you think victim services are important for public safety?
Well, in Minnesota, we have crime victims' rights. So that is number one, and that we do adhere to that in upholding crime victims' rights. But also, I think that it's important too that there is a level of accountability for those who have caused harm, but then also that support for those who were harmed, and can also, I think, in times prevent retaliation, if it's, crimes of violence, things like that. But really overall ensuring that there is some sort of accountability, and helping folks as well on a path to healing at some point.
So we recently had a town hall that really showcased our victim services. Can you tell people about that?
Yes, we did. So we had a town hall last Monday evening at the 1256 Penn Building, and it was really well received. I was super excited to get the team out into the community. No one can talk about their work the way that they do. And I think a lot of people in community don't know that this division exists within our office, but also how amazing the team really is and how they're able to provide support. We are the most diverse division within the office. I'm super proud of that. And we are able to provide those services in a culturally specific way, sometimes in different languages. We have bilingual staff, so really meeting people where they're at. So we did a town hall, we showed a video that showcased our staff, and then we had a panel discussion as well. The event was really well attended and it was super well received by the community as well. All the feedback we received was really positive. And I'm looking forward to doing this event again.
Excellent. What different roles does our staff have?
Within the division?
Yes.
Sure. So we kind of break the department down. So there is an adult prosecution team. There is a youth prosecution team where the victim services staff are. And then we also have our domestic abuse service center staff, DASC, who specialize in that domestic violence support.
So let me follow up. We use APD for adult prosecution. That's actually the division that would prosecute person-related crimes, our robberies, sexual assaults, murders, that kind of thing.
Correct.
And so what does staff do, or victim services staff do, to help victims through the process?
Sure. So one example, our attorneys actually cannot meet with victims on their own. They will potentially make themselves a witness if they do that. So anytime an attorney needs to have a meeting or communication with a victim, our team is there to be that extra layer and provide that support as well, but also to help kind of navigate the legal terms and provide, I would say, a level of comfort and care to victims, trying to navigate a system that is confusing to even those of us who work within it, but also folks don't ever really expect to find themselves in a system, and oftentimes it's because something bad happened.
You said it, you're very proud of the fact that that team is the most diverse in the office. Why is diversity important?
I think as public servants in particular, we want to look like the community that we serve, and people like seeing themselves reflected, but also there's cultural differences, cultural norms, language differences, and being able to meet people where they are during a time of vulnerability is really important to us. And understanding the cultural nuances that different cultures and communities have is also important to us as well.
And I think many people who come to us as people who've been harmed have had bad experiences with the system as well, and not a lot of reason to trust the system. And so how does victim services help on that front?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because there is a lot of inherent mistrust with many of our communities. As system folks, the systems themselves, we've caused a lot of harm to communities historically. So I think having our team in particular to be able to be that bridge between an individual or their family and the system helps build that trust, because that is someone who is consistent. They're going to continue providing information and support. And help people in that moment of need, which does contribute to rebuilding trust that may have never been there.
Well, thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Hi, we just had a conversation with Jen White. Now we're going to talk to Siri Lopensgaard. She is the head of our Domestic Abuse Service Center, or DASC. DASC is an interesting part of the office. It is funded by the county attorney's office, but it's actually in a slightly separate location. And the expectation, if a victim of domestic violence comes to us, is not necessarily that they help with the prosecution. The DASC staff meet people where they are and try to help them develop safety plans and other things that Siri is going to talk about. So Siri will join us next. Hi, Siri.
Hi.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Sari Lokensgaard. I'm the director of the Domestic Abuse Service Center. I've been with the office now since 2019. So if I'm doing my math right, a little over 7 years. And my background is in social work. I have my master's of social work. And immediately after I received my master's, I went right into really grassroots nonprofit domestic violence advocacy work. And so I've worked with a few nonprofit organizations before coming to the Hennepin County Attorney's Office.
So, what is DASC, with the Domestic Abuse Service
Mhm.
Center?
The Domestic Abuse Service Center, we have been around for over 31 years. And over the past 31 years, we've really evolved through proudly adhering to our mission statement, which is to respond to the needs of victims of domestic violence through a trauma-informed lens delivered by a diverse and inclusive staff that reflect the communities that we serve. And the best way to explain it is DASC really serves as a place where victims of domestic violence can receive a multitude of services in one centralized location.
And how do people get those services? Do they have to set up an appointment, or
Mhm.
what do they have to do, and where are you located?
Yeah, so we have recently moved over the past 2 years. Our new location is on A14 in the Hennepin County Government Center, but we do offer services both in person and remote. And there are no prerequisites to access our services. Anyone can pick up the phone and schedule an appointment, or anyone can walk into our center and access services on a first come, first served walk in basis.
So that raises the question. You don't have to have called the police, or you don't actually have to have been the victim of domestic violence. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. There are no requirements to filing a police report to be able to talk with an advocate and discuss options and safety plan. We also receive a lot of calls from concerned family members and friends
Mhm.
wanting to talk about options and how to best support the person that they love is struggling with domestic violence.
So I imagine that some people might think, well, if I come into DASC, which is technically part of the county attorney's office, they are going to pressure me
Mm,
to want to file charges, to want to prosecute. Talk
mhm.
a little bit about that.
Our main goal is to really meet an individual where they are at. And so essentially what that means is everybody's situation is going to look different. Everyone's backgrounds and what they need in that particular moment is going to look different. And so, what we're going to do as advocates is really sit down, listen to your concerns, validate your concerns, and then discuss options for safety, which again, that is going to look different for each person. Some of the main services that we provide at DASC is assisting individuals with protection orders, providing crisis support and intervention, connecting an individual with an attorney through our contract with Central Minnesota Legal Services, as well as be able to provide culturally specific and trauma-informed support. So again, we are going to meet you where you are at in your journey and in your experience and really talk about the best options for you.
So people, I think most people have heard about orders for protection,
Mhm.
and your staff helps people get those if that's something that they want.
Yep.
But those aren't always the right thing for every person. Why is that?
Yeah. An order for protection is a civil legal document that essentially prohibits an individual from communicating with a victim survivor, coming to a victim survivor's home, protection for pets, firearm restrictions, you name it. There's many things that an order for protection can do, but it is one piece of a safety plan. It is not the be all end all. And so while we will sit down and talk with you about that as a potential option, again, everyone's situation is going to be different. And for some victim survivors, it actually could be a hindrance to safety. So before we even file, we're going to talk about what the process is going to look, what the paperwork is going to look like, what someone can expect next, and really discuss the pros and cons for that individual situation.
What would be a con? Why would a person not want one?
Mhm. For some victim survivors, there is this concern that if I file a protection order, I know that the person I'm filing the order against has to be served, which essentially just means they have to be notified that there's a protection order filed against them. And with that, they will be able to see everything in the protection order. And for many victim survivors, that causes concern of fear of retaliation from the person causing them harm.
And when you said that they get to see everything in the protection order, that what's in the protection order is kind of a narrative of what the victim has said has happened. And so why they want a protective order to protect them from this particular person's conduct.
Correct, as well as the restrictions that are now upon the person being served with the order. And so that in and of itself could lead to safety concerns because they're concerned the other party will retaliate because now they're restricted from coming home. They're restricted from owning firearms, things like that.
Speaking of owning firearms, there's another option called an ERPO, or an extreme risk protection order. Can you talk about that? And do we have resources to help people obtain those?
Yeah, so as of 2024, extreme risk protection orders, also known as ERPOs, were passed into effect. And ERPOs really restrict an individual from owning, possessing, and having access, including purchasing firearms, specifically for individuals that pose a threat to themselves or to a third party through use of firearm. And so our office has really created an extreme risk protection order team. We have an assistant attorney who can not only file extreme risk protection orders on behalf of the office, but can also go out into the community and train and provide training and technical assistance to law enforcement agencies that also can file extreme risk protection orders. In addition, we have hired a legal service specialist or a victim service specialist or an advocate to work with family and household members in filing extreme risk protection orders as well. So if someone does come into the Domestic Abuse Service Center and they, are experiencing domestic violence and there might be concerns of use of firearm or threat of firearm, they can definitely sit down with our extreme risk protection order advocate and explore all of those options.
And in terms of, they may not have a gun, for instance, but when the extreme risk protection order is actually signed by the court, it goes into a database of sorts. And so if you go and try to buy a firearm, that red flag will pop up, which is kind of why they're referred to as red flag laws.
Yes, that's correct. So it not only allows law enforcement to issue a search warrant and retrieve those firearms that might be in the other party's home or car or wherever they've been residing or keeping their firearm. But yes, it does also prevent and put their name into a database, so it prevents them from being able to purchase a firearm.
What else can DASC staff do to help somebody who has concerns for their safety?
Yeah. Well, what I do want to say about DASC is we have a number of agencies that we contract with. So in addition with the Central Minnesota Legal Services to be able to provide legal aid and consultation and representation, we also contract with a number of community-based, culturally specific organizations as well. I cannot stress how important it is for someone to be able to walk into our center or pick up the phone and have the option to work with someone who looks like them, speaks their language, or understand the different cultural barriers that they may face, because again, that's going to look different for every single person. And so again, when someone comes into DASC, they have the option to work with a specific advocate who again is going to meet them where they're at, provide trauma-informed and individual strength-based support for the individual experiencing what they're experiencing. I think another piece of that is we do offer multilingual advocacy at DASC. So currently we have advocates who speak English, Spanish, Somali, Hmong, Hindi, Nepali, Newari, Tamil, Telugu, and Sanskrit, which I think just thinking about kind of as much wraparound support as we can, I think that is really effective in being able to meet people where they're at.
Sometimes people don't really think about this, but it always strikes me when I go up to DASC in the new space that there's this really lovely area that's meant for children. And part of it, it's got just a tree on the wall. I mean, it's got so many things, but it has a space that's glassed in so that the adult can talk to one of our staff while keeping an eye on their kid, but their kid doesn't have to hear what's being discussed.
Yeah, our main focus is we never want childcare to be a barrier to someone accessing services. At the same time, we also don't want to involve kiddos in the appointment because that can be re-traumatizing. Also, if there is abuse towards children, we don't want to impact a potential investigation. And so, first of all, we have this playroom. We really want kids just to be able to be kids when they come into our center. But then parent or guardian can meet with an advocate in that separate room inside our playroom. So then they can still keep an eye on their kiddo. Kiddo can still see them for safety and security, but they can also have that privacy to be able to talk to the advocate in confidence. The other thing to your question as well about safety for victims is we do have a pantry at DASC. So our pantry is made up of basic need items, diapers, wipes, bottles, baby formula, clothing, especially for individuals who maybe come to DASC immediately following a domestic incident and they want to change into something clean. We also have socks, snacks, hand warmers, you name it. So again, we just want folks to know that there are those resources in addition with meeting with an advocate.
Can you talk about approximately how many people DASC interacted with last year?
So since the pandemic, we have really allowed and been able to provide services, as I said earlier, both in person and remote. And because of that, since 2022, we have consistently had over 22,000 advocacy contacts each year, and that has remained the same including 2025. Those advocacy contacts include our order for protection appointments, our crisis phone calls, our court support, as well as our response and advocacy support from our Gone on Arrival prosecution team as well. In addition, DASC assists with about 80% of all order for protections in Hennepin County, which is a pretty heavy lift. And last year alone in 2025, over 25 or 2,300 order for protections were filed with district court.
So one other thing I wanted to talk to you about was that for the first time ever last year, people from your team and also Victim Witness went out to Annunciation. Can you tell us how that happened and what made you think about doing something that was entirely new, given that the cases that we receive in the office or our victim witness people interact with are typically cases that we've charged, not kind of first responder situations?
Yeah. No, thank you for that question. I think that it definitely was unprecedented. I think we all do this work for different reasons, but I think at the heart of our work is really being called to help. And so I think, the second we all learned and heard, whether you heard from our division manager or from social media, I think we all just felt the call to step in and do what we could. And we were given the opportunity to be able to go to Annunciation and respond. And so with that, we didn't know really what we were walking into or what to expect as first responders because we'd never done that before. But immediately we thought about comfort items, stress balls, waters, snacks, right? And we really just got there and just kind of stepped into our role of advocates from a trauma-informed perspective.
And part of that was actually interacting with the parents who had children who were no longer with us, and I was talking to you a lot, and that was really difficult for your team. How does your team process trauma? We talked about being trauma informed, but you are constantly talking to people who have been harmed by trauma. And there can be a lot of secondary trauma, that kind of thing. So what do you do? What does our staff do to try to process or make sure that trauma impacts them as little as possible?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think similar to thinking about safety planning, how we care for ourselves and how we allow ourselves to remain sustainable in this work looks different for every single person. And I know for me personally, the reason why I say sustainability versus self-care is sustainability is, I want to think about what I'm doing throughout all hours of my day, not just when I leave work. What am I doing to allow myself to remain sustainable? And so, I can assume that for a lot of staff who respond to this type of work every day, have their own routines and activities that they enjoy, the family and friends that they spend time with. But one of the things that I know we really did in this office is come together to figure out how we can support our staff. And so we were able to bring folks in to do healing circles for our team, to be able to do sound baths and more kind of meditation type activities to refocus. And I think too, we can go home and we can talk about the work that we do, but people who don't do it don't understand it.
Right.
And so just having the space to be able to sit down with one another and be able to process together, I think it has been really impactful.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your work, Siri.
Thank you, Mary.
You just heard from Siri Lokensgaard, who talked about DASC, or our Domestic Abuse Service Center. Now you're going to hear from Sunita King, one of our wonderful victim service specialists. She is one of our staff who works with people who've been harmed or victims every day. We're here with Sunita King. Sunita, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I am born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and have been a member of the Northside community for my time. And then I went to college in Louisiana, the Grambling State University.
Grambling.
Yes, shout out. And and so I've been employed since I've graduated in '91.
What makes you interested in the work that you do? Or why did you become involved in it?
I believe this work chose me. I have worked in all different capacities with all different individuals, and it's all been about service. I've worked with special needs. I've worked with mothers and children and chemical dependency, and I worked with adolescent boys at one point where I didn't understand where I was bringing them, but it was EJJ at the health service building. And so fast forward years later, I applied for this position and am working with probation and EJJ.
Extended juvenile jurisdiction.
Yes. And working within this county. And so it just made it, I feel like I was supposed to be here.
This might be a really hard question, but can you describe a day in your life, work day? And I only say that because like a week ago, you and I were talking about,
Yeah.
you had been in a very serious, very difficult felony domestic violence trial for a month.
Yes.
It was very draining and that kind of thing. But is there such a thing as a typical day?
There is. I mean, there's one thing that I enjoy is that there is never the same day. Even in trial for those 4 weeks, that was new to me. I had never been in trial for 4 weeks ever. And so how do you navigate taking care of yourself? Working with the family and showing up in that space every single day. So a typical day is always different. So I can show up to work and think that I have my plan of A, B, C, D, and then there's something that throws that, and you just learn how to pivot. And so that is what I just prepare myself. Like, yes, I have a plan, but then B may be a pivot.
One thing I've noticed in this role, we meet with so many different families, people who've been harmed, and it is just grief. They come with their grief here, and we're working in a system that really doesn't deal with grief much at all. Where we have a process, a criminal legal process that's very confusing and mysterious and maybe not quite what victims, families, or victims want. How do you work with families or victims in those circumstances where they're coming to you in grief and there's certain things they think they want or maybe they don't know what they're doing, but how do you approach those situations?
Great question. Really meeting them where they're at, listening to what their need is. And sometimes they don't even know what their need is. And to be patient with what they're understanding why they're here. No one comes to our office and is happy to be here ever. And so knowing that they're coming through these doors because of a choice that another individual chose to harm, coming through the doors, listening to them, understanding that they don't understand the legal terms, they don't understand the system. Some have been harmed by the system, and here comes another phase. What are you? What is your role? And so for me, it's being authentic in every situation and taking the time to get to know who they are. Um, a lot of times, the victims' families focus on the defendant. My goal always is to bring the victim into that space. And let's talk about that because I don't know the victim. Sometimes the victim may have not survived the incident.
Mhm.
So for me, it's important for me to know who they loved and who are we here for. And so that is super important to me. And it gives them understanding that it's not just about the defendant. We're going to honor this victim in this space as well.
I'm imagining that you kind of get the brunt of a lot of anger
Yes.
because you are the messenger
Mhm.
from the prosecution team or what have you. How how do you react to that? How do you think about that? You're there trying to help
Sure.
meet people where they're at,
Yeah.
and the way they're expressing their grief, their
Mhm.
anger is directed at you.
Yes. That happens a lot of times. And
Mhm.
so knowing that this is not personal, it's not about me.
Mhm.
Um, there has been some really tough cases where not knowing how this is, I'm the information giver, not always of the best news. So it is, for me, it's being authentic, standing in the space, knowing that I'm here to serve, knowing that, yeah, today may be a rough day. I may be able to, um, and that their job is not to take care of me. My job is to take care of them.
Mhm.
So just making sure that they are knowing that Sunita's going to be solid. I'm going to be standing here. It may be a rough day. And I say to them when we first start our relationship together is there's going to be days that I'm not going to be your favorite person, and that's okay. I can take care of myself. And my job is to make sure that you understand your rights are upheld and that we move forward. And that works. And that has worked. That has been my success, with families where I've had really difficult families. And once we have that conversation, it doesn't just happen overnight, but it does come in the time because they need to know that I'm going to be consistent, that I'm going to show up for them. Yes, they might have said some horrible things, and I still show up and serve.
I think something that people don't often think about is what we ask families to do.
Mhm.
For instance, in a trial, we had that trial for a month,
Mhm.
and there are rules in a courtroom.
Yes.
And there are things that are said in a courtroom that probably, I'm sure, anger
Yes.
family members, but they are not supposed to respond.
Right.
And we try to exercise a great deal of control over
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
who have every reason to be angry.
Yes.
How do you prepare them for being in that environment?
I really want. I have a room set aside for the family for us to meet in, for them to pray in, for us to just kind of center ourselves before.
Mhm.
And I give them a heads up before, if it's going to be medical examiner who is coming on site that day to testify, giving them the option. What does that look like for a medical examiner? What pictures are going to be shown?
Mhm.
So the space that I have provided for the family that they don't have to be in there. And so they can go into that space and just be able to just take care of themselves in that space. When you hear a defendant who wants to apologize to the family, which was very difficult for our family to hear that and not respond and not do the things. It is really about just coaching them throughout the whole process. It's like you're going to hear things that you don't that you're not going to agree with. They're going to demonize your sister, whatever the situation is. But you have to understand that they'll look at you as the issue, as the problem, instead of why we're really in this courtroom. And so just helping them understand that we want this information to be in the courtroom so the jury can hear it, so they can make a decision at the end of who's guilty and who's not.
And so you were referring to the trial that we just had,
Mhm.
where the defendant chose to take the stand
Yes.
and surprisingly apologize to the family, and then at the same time describe exactly what he did to their loved one.
Right.
I can't even imagine what that was like. I'm imagining you heard from the family about how that felt to them.
Yes. After that, that was a very tough day. And after it was like before our lunch time, so it was like the break. We went upstairs, and before they were to dispense and go and have their lunch, I wanted to take some time to center with the family before we left that space. That was sacred space, and that's what I call that space. When I work with the families, I call that sacred space. And we were in the room, and there was something that happened in that room that I had never experienced, where it was, crying and praying for one another, and just being able to, how do they process that? But just being as the advocate in that space, it was like, I'm standing here with you. Like whatever this looks like right now, I'm not afraid of it. Let's get through this so we can continue, because we had a couple more weeks left, of the trial. So I really do feel like, as that being an advocate, or being a legal service specialist, or what we're called, I think it's that space, we have to honor it in a way that is it's a we know that this work is bigger than me, and I am blessed to be in this space, and so I walk in that, and I honor the space, and I honor the family, and the victim that's no longer with us, and so it just really came together. And I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. It just was something that I witnessed that I had never in this space witnessed before.
So you may have answered this a little bit, but what keeps you doing this very, very difficult work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really love what I do. 10 years, I'm here, still here. I believe in this work. I love working with people. I always have. Meeting people in such a horrible, sad time of their life, and to be able to help navigate this system that doesn't understand their grief or their pain, that kind of disregards the victims, feel disregarded, because it's about it's about the defendant. And so being able to just continue to honor their loved one, and for them to walk in this grace of sadness. They're sad, and they're disappointed, they're mad, all of the things. And just to be able to be there and walk through that, helping them understand. I don't care if they have to ask the same question 15 times. I'm going to answer the question 15 times. So they have an understanding, because I never want them to leave here with the thought of, what did I just walk away from? So I pride myself into making sure that they are definitely up to date, up to speed, with my correspondence of what's going on in this courtroom, and what are the terms that they are not familiar with.
We are really lucky to have you, Sunita. Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you so much.
You've just heard from Jen White, who's the Director of Community Affairs, which includes our victim witness team, Siri Lokenstard, who talked about the Domestic Abuse Service Center, or DASC, and Sunita King, who talked about what her day-to-day experiences are when working with people who've been harmed. I hope you can see from these interviews how much the people in our office care about what happens to people who come through this system, and the efforts that we and they make to try to make this system as understandable and as easy to navigate as they can. Thank you for joining us.